Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Marvel, DC, Marvel, DC. What's coming out in 2015? What suddenly isn't coming out in 2015? Yes, it seems that the two comic book movie titans are dominating the news. And some of you have even pointed this out recently, saying, Grace, isn't anything else happening in Hollywood? And the shorter answer is no, not at that scale, not at that level, that heightened level of intense audience interest. Which is interesting because a lot of movies are coming out in 2015. It is already a famous year for being just jam-packed with blockbusters. And one is Star Wars. Now, granted, it comes out at the end of 2015. It's going to be a Christmas release. But they've been doing a remarkably good job of keeping things close to the vest. Very few leaks coming out of this camp. Especially rumors. You know, when things come out, they're confirmed and that's it. There are a couple of rumors about who's meeting with who, but generally, all we've really heard is, for instance, a lot of the script issues that are going on. Michael Arndt was working on it. They had to take him back, and they just felt he wasn't fast enough because they want to make their date. And so Lawrence Kasdan and J.J. Abrams took over scripting duties. Now, the TCA conferences are going on right now. That's a television event. And J.J. Abrams, who is very heavily involved in television still, despite all the huge movies he makes, is there obviously promoting his various shows. But of course, these events, people ask the big questions that they know people really want to know. And of course, with J.J. Abrams, it's how's Star Wars coming along. And he has confirmed, and it's refreshing to get some new confirmed news right directly from J.J. Abrams. No speculation, no fan speculation there, or smaller websites trying to get some traffic. But J.J. Abrams has confirmed that the script for Star Wars is done. And besides that, the casting contracts are very close to being signed, which is fascinating that he's that far along in the casting process and very few leaks have come out about who he's talking to. But he did confirm one person that he has met with, which I think is really very interesting, and that's Jesse Plemons. Jesse Plemons, you will know him as Todd from Breaking Bad, Jesse's nemesis towards about the last season or so. And I think that's brilliant casting. For two reasons. First of all, some people are speculating that he kind of looks like Mark Hamill in the second two Star Wars films. Obviously, well, you might not know this, Mark Hamill was involved in a horrible motorcycle, I believe, accident. It was a car accident, but I think it was a motorcycle accident after filming A New Hope. And he really, unfortunately needed to have a lot of reconstructive surgery done on his face, which is why he looks so different and why they try to make a narrative reason for that at the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back. But so people are speculating that Jesse Plemons looks somewhat like, Mark Hamill does in the second two films, and therefore might be playing his son, because there's some discussion that this new film, Episode 7, will kind of deal with Star Wars: The Next Generation, and kind of be a cast-off, the old original cast, Han Solo, Princess Leia, and Luke Skywalker handing over the franchise to their kids, or this new group of people. There's been rumors about Obi-Wan having a granddaughter, etc. So people feel Jesse Plemons is a realistic casting choice for that reason. And also, he is being considered. J.J. Abrams confirmed it. He's been talking to him, and he didn't say, we talked and we parted. So I think there's a very good chance we'll be hearing Jesse Plemons as an official announcement. Now, the reason I like the casting choice so much is I think Jesse Plemons is a perfect example of an unknown but yet still qualified and almost fan-based stamp of approval actor. He's not well known enough that he really can count as a discovery. He has really not done much besides the Breaking Bad role of Todd, which he was very good at. He was a villain there, so I think he really hasn't quite yet connected with audiences. Audiences haven't seen totally what he can do, but I think he was very compelling in the scenes that he had. I thought he was very good, and I think he showed kind of a lot of personality. I think that's something a lot of actors are missing today. They don't have a lot of personality. They're more an image. I think that's something Chris Pine suffers from a little bit, and Jack Ryan. I think Jesse Plemons has a lot of depth of character. He was able to play a villain, yet still make the villain very compelling, at least to me, and I think to a lot of people. I think that Todd really struck a chord with a lot of viewers, despite not being someone who was there for all of the seasons on Breaking Bad. So I think this is just a perfect example of an actor in the right spot where he's proven himself, but yet he's not successful in so much that J.J. Abrams still can't claim that he discovered him and he elevated him to a great level with Star Wars. And I think he does constitute a fresh face. And of course, having the Breaking Bad legacy tie into Star Wars is never a bad thing. So that's very exciting. So with J.J. Abrams saying that the script is done and the contracts are close to being signed, expect some legitimate announcements very soon for Star Wars, which is very exciting. And that'll change up the conversation for those of you who are getting tired of your Marvel versus DC headlines. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story of the day is, I talk a lot about James Wan on this show. I'm really impressed with how he's really a self-made director, and he not only has he been able to really make a name for himself in the horror genre, but he has really been able to switch genres now with Fast and Furious. I think he's a filmmaker with a lot of integrity, and I've really just been really impressed with his meteoric yet very well orchestrated rise through the ranks of Hollywood. He's not just someone being pulled along on the tidal wave with other people, pulling the strings. He's very much a self-made man. Not to say he doesn't owe a lot of favors around town, particularly to Jason Blum. He does, producer Jason Blum, but still, it's very impressive. Now, another story I want to bring up that I like a lot is that the other half of the James Wan creative team has been Leigh Whannell. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Leigh Whannell. He is a writer-actor in the Insidious films. He's one of the two paranormal investigators, and he was in the first Saw film. They created Saw together, James Wan and Leigh Whannell. And as James Wan goes on to build his career, Leigh Whannell is taking his first steps to try and really break out and build his own career. And I think he has a very hot property on his hands, which just popped up at Sundance, called Cooties. And it was a very successful first screening. And it looks like Lionsgate might pick it up. And Lionsgate, of course, did very well with Leigh Whannell and James Wan with the Saw franchise. They're the ones who picked that up. Of course, they kicked them off, and Whannell and Wan left because they were unhappy with the direction the franchise was going. But it's nice to see, if you want to be a successful business person, you have to protect yourself, but sometimes you have to let bygones be bygones and not be afraid to move forward with a company again anyway. Lionsgate isn't, obviously they're the Hunger Games company. They're in a very good position to launch a movie. And they have a lot of money these days, thanks to things like Twilight and the Hunger Games. All right, so so Summit Lionsgate are now co-owned together. That's why I put Twilight in there. All right, so it's called Cooties, and it's a horror comedy. And the basic setup, I think it's very clever. It's tricky. I'd be interested to see if they can pull it off. But it could be a Cabin in the Woods type horror comedy, where Elijah Wood, who I believe is also involved behind the scenes, plays a substitute teacher, an aspiring writer who makes his money, being a substitute teacher, and he goes to a school only for there to be an outbreak of cooties at the school. But this is just teasing, imaginary virus. Instead, it turns the kids into like these killer cannibals, these little kids. That's where I think the movie is going to get tricky. How do you fight little kids without having flashbacks to the really recent, horrible, real-life tragedies that have been happening at schools across the country? So that could be tricky. But anyway, the teachers have to fight for their lives and escape the school and kind of band together. It has a little bit of a Community feel to it too, I feel, when you think about it. So it's a very interesting vibe. So Elijah Wood is the star. Leigh Whannell has also given himself a role. But it also has a very interesting, largely television cast, which is why I think it draws comparisons to Community. But Rainn Wilson from The Office is in it, Jack McBrayer from 30 Rock, Allison Pill from Newsroom, and some other cast members. But I think this is a very inventive idea for a comedy, and I think if it's packaged and positioned correctly, could be quite successful. A horror comedy. And it'll be interesting to see if Leigh Whannell can succeed without James Wan, because Wan is really walking his own path now, and Whannell isn't involved at all in Fast 7. All right, so that's the second story of the day. Now, the third story of the day is I was watching the Sherlock season premiere here. It's just premiered here in the United States on Sunday. So I watched it last night because PBS airs it at 10 o'clock at night. It's like an hour and a half. It's too late to watch it on Sunday. That's ridiculous timing, but it's worked out very well for them in the ratings, so they're going to keep it there. But I was watching the show, and it was interesting. I think that I was so impressed with Cumberbatch's work in the role, and he was also at TCA this week. Earlier this week or late last week, talking about Sherlock and its huge fan base. And the reason I bring that up is because when I watched the episode, I thought it was interesting to see how iconic this Sherlock Holmes has become, and also how the show is kind of playing into that, and maybe perhaps buying a little bit into its own hype, which is warranted. I mean, the show is just so hyped at this point, but that's a very tricky fine line to walk. So far, I think they did a pretty good job. This first episode was less mystery, more fan service, I felt, which I thought was a very interesting development for the show. But the reason I'm bringing you up today on a morning movie news show is that I thought Cumberbatch did such a phenomenal job in the role that it made me really feel bad that he's had such bad luck with Hollywood and the film roles that he's gotten. And I was thinking to myself, why is he just so incredible here, yet he's not clicking on the big screen? What is the problem? And so I was thinking about it, and I read a TCA article covering his, the Sherlock panel, and he said that it was really meant a lot to him to have movie stars that he admires, like Harrison Ford, when they were on the Graham Norton show, come up to him and say, "You're just really fabulous," which I think is true. I think Cumberbatch is fabulous, and I think it's great that Harrison Ford realizes that. But I think Harrison Ford is a great person to come up to him and say that, because I think the qualities that Harrison Ford had that worked so well from his Indiana Jones is kind of a similar mix that you see with Cumberbatch's Sherlock. Now, of course, there's like an ego there that wasn't with Indiana Jones, but the mix of action and humor and kind of like a bigger-than-life flourish makes the character similar, this version of Sherlock and the Indiana Jones. I mean, the Indiana Jones, his fedora was so iconic, and then when you watch this episode, the coat for Sherlock is becoming more iconic almost than the hat that the original Sherlock is famous for wearing. And there's this great scene where Cumberbatch comes up to the door of 221 Baker Street, and his shadow, his silhouette is in the door frame. And Cumberbatch played into it beautifully. He really struck the pose correctly to really make it really strike your imagination and capture your imagination without seeming egotistical too much, like he was too much like he knew what he was doing. It wasn't too self-aware. And it was really well done. It was almost to the level of when Indiana Jones would put on his fedora. And so I think that is interesting. They're able to capture that, but that kind of movie role doesn't quite exist so much anymore. Movie roles, especially blockbusters, are trying to go towards more the realistic trend. That's something Christopher Nolan introduced to the genre. So I think that Cumberbatch, what he's missing in his film roles is this fun, this element of fun, which was on display in the Sherlock episode in numerous areas. For instance, the whole, restaurant exchange with Martin Freeman was very well done and very similar to, as you might recall, the Indiana Jones Last Crusade scene when he goes to look at the tapestries. Very, very similar, same exact kind of dynamic. And I think it's very hard to pull that kind of humor off with still keeping your character cool, and both Ford and Cumberbatch succeeded immensely in doing it. So I think that Cumberbatch's team, his management team, really needs to try and find a movie role for him that has flourish and fun to it. And that kind of epic nature, because I think that's how he'll be able to show movie audiences that aren't familiar with his television work what he can do. Right now, I think they're treating him more like a typical British actor. Your Patrick Stewarts, your Alec Guinnesses, that kind of, Derek Jacobi. I think they're taking that kind of a stance, and that's not the kind of actor Cumberbatch is. I think Cumberbatch is a blockbuster actor. I think he's a pulp actor. I think he is not some British thesp, that came from the Royal Shakespeare Academy. I mean, look at, Tom Hiddleston's almost exactly taking his routine for Loki, even complete with dye job and longer hair, and having great success with it. So Cumberbatch needs to find a Loki-esque role for himself. All right, so that's the third story of the day. So now on today's viewer question. This comes from Sebi237. And Sebi says, "Hey Grace, question. I've actually asked a lot of questions, and you've answered them many times in the comments. Thanks for that." My pleasure, Sebi. If I can't get to a question in the videos, I try to get to them in the comments. And Sebi says, "But it would be so great if you could answer this one on Morning Movie News." I am going to do it. Today I shall do it in the video. So Sebi says, and a lot of people seconded this question, so that's why I picked it also. So Sebi asks, "So as you know, there is a huge discussion right now in the USA about The Wolf of Wall Street because of the graphic nudity and language. And even you talked about it in your review. Actually didn't have a big problem with the language. I don't have a big problem with language. It was basically the nudity that bothered me, but I'll get into that in a moment." And it said, "But why is that?" Sebi wants to know. "Here in Europe, at least in countries like Belgium, Germany, and France, it's really common that movies show explicit nudity and some strong language, but they still get a PG-13 rating like Wolf of Wall Street. On the other hand, many action movies, dark movies like The Dark Knight, or movies with violence who have PG-13 ratings in the US are R-rated over here. Why do you think that America is so quote-unquote paranoid of the naked body and sex scenes, but it is okay with violent scenes that teenagers can easily watch in cinemas?" Smiley face. You guys are picking up that I love the smiley face. I think that's great. Would really appreciate your thoughts. Great question, Sebi, and I think a lot of people are very curious about this. Now, I want to say this isn't just America, though, that's having a problem with The Wolf of Wall Street's nudity. It's actually having to be severely edited in a number of, I think, Middle Eastern countries, and I believe a little, maybe in Asia. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it is being censored, and in some countries, this can't be shown. Now, my problem, as I said in my review, I watch HBO, and there's a huge amount of graphic nudity on HBO. And America, in large part, really doesn't having a big problem with that. Of course, it's a different level of audience. HBO doesn't need to get everybody in the country to watch their television show to be considered successful, especially because it's a pay cable station, so they can have much lower numbers and be considered a hit. But a movie needs to really appeal to a broader audience in order to get the money, the budget, the box office that it needs. However, Game of Thrones is nothing short of a phenomenon worldwide, but here in the United States, and it is notorious for its nudity. And you can see nobody has a problem with that. I think the problem with the nudity in Wolf of Wall Street is that it was almost it was trying too hard, and also it seemed to take the place of actual storytelling. I think that's a big problem that a lot of people had with it, that it was a little bit too in your face. And I think that's what's going on here. I think that's maybe the cultural difference. Now, I'm not European. I can't speak to what's going on over on your side of the world, Sebi, but I can tell you kind of, I think, what I believe is, the atmosphere here in the United States. Now, of course, in Middle America, and this, of course, isn't a blanket statement, but the majority of Middle Americans do not, I'm sure, tune into HBO and do have a genuine problem with, nudity and even violence. It's an issue. And also, I would say there are different levels of violence. I think a lot of people in America, myself included, have a significant problem with torture porn. But yet, violence that I think that, and this is the very important distinction, violence that people feel actually happens, such as, like something in Scarface, the way a drug dealer would deal with people, or violence that you could actually run into, sadly, which is something very prevalent here. I mean, you see all the horrible shootings. It's just really tragic, and I do agree with many of your comments in the comment section that we need gun control here, but that's a whole different discussion. In a political discussion. But, I think that Americans feel that violence could become a part of their lives, and so it doesn't seem so foreign to them. Where I think in Europe, you guys have very good gun control laws, very few occurrences of horrific violence, whereas they're in the paper here all the time. And so I think that, it seems more removed from daily life, whereas I think Americans feel that's realistic, that's accurate, that could actually happen. I could see that happening, and I could see myself in that scenario. However, when it comes to nudity, Americans aren't really, there's not a lot of nudity here in public. That's a private matter. Nobody here, I think, really wants to see anybody making out in public. I think some people might be tempted to say, oh, if it's a heterosexual couple, it's okay. I think America's becoming extremely tolerant, but still, no matter who's making out, nobody wants to see it. Keep it to yourself. And I think even that's why HBO is okay, because that's something you're watching in the privacy of your home by yourself, or just with, people you've selected. But I think it's still uncomfortable to see something like that in a movie theater. Surrounded by other people very much in public. So it's interesting to see how 50 Shades of Grey will do. Would Game of Thrones be as big a deal with those nude scenes if it was in theaters? I also think the issue was that the surprise of the nudity. As you can see, Wolf of Wall Street, that kind of scandal is actually wearing away even here in the United States. More people are going to see it. It's doing pretty good at the box office. I think the big problem was that it was horrible nudity that nobody expected on Christmas Day. It was just a perfect storm of offensiveness. So I think that's a big issue. So I think that Americans very much feel that, just to recap my comment, American culture feels that violence is a part of everyday life. It is out in the open. It's part of the public. It's in the public sphere. It's something that people have to deal with and should be prepared with, and movies help you prepare for that. I think movies, I really feel strongly about this. Movies are a great way to get life experiences without having to actually live through those life experiences. I think you can learn a lot from movies. I think movies, because they're realistic, are very true to form, and I think that's very helpful. So I think people are okay with violence to that degree. Now again, when you get into torture porn, it's a totally different level, and you'll see those movies don't do hugely, like they're not mainstream here in the United States. But when it comes to sexuality and nudity, people really feel that should stay at home. And as I said, America's becoming a place where you can do whatever you want at home, but just keep it at home. So I think that's the issue. And if anyone here is from Europe, Sebi, if you want to elaborate, it would be great to hear the other side of the story, how you guys feel, and why do you think that violence is such a problem, and why is it flipped? Why do you guys have the exact opposite situation? All right, and also, if you disagree, fellow Americans, with my explanation, if you think I got it wrong, write your thoughts down below. Thank you for tuning in today's Morning Movie News. Write down below what you think of today's top stories, the viewer question, and anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.